Welcome, everyone, to House Notes Podcast. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Julius Cartwright, and he is the founder and broker of Dreamteam Realty, Inc., as well as a few other things. So we'll get into that later, but thank you for coming. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, Mr. Cartwright, if you could, please tell us about what's going on in the Cleveland metropolitan area in terms of the market. I would say, how would you compare it to pre-COVID versus post-COVID? Or actually, we're still in COVID.
Oh my goodness. I could take up the whole show just talking about this one topic. But thank you again for having me on the podcast. It's a situation now where the market began to grow in terms of its activity during the COVID, but now it seems to have not cooled down. Inventory has started to shrink, and it's a real problem in Cleveland like most major cities around the country.
Okay. And what would you say is the reason for the shortage of inventory right now?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I wouldn't really say it's one particular piece. I would say it's a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, first of all, during the pandemic, there was an ejection of capital into the economy. So that money, a lot of people used to spend, and the money rolled around and was utilized in real estate. Now what we're seeing is the sort of the aftermath, the fallout of that is that most of what we're seeing is a lot of investors coming into the market from around the United States and international, and then we're seeing the corporate players come in, these different organizations and hedge funds buying up properties. And so you got that movement going, and then you got the local guy, the small guy in the greater Cleveland area that's just trying to buy a house for him and his family. They're competing against all of these different genres, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So obviously that would make it hard for traditional buyers to compete in such a market. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say in most cases it would. In some instances, it's not. So here's the thing. If you go back and look at the east side of Cleveland, which is predominantly where African Americans are located, that part of town has not really recouped its valuations. So in that instance, the investors actually helped. So investor dollars coming in from 2014 to like 2018, it helped stabilize the market and bring up prices. It created jobs, created economy. Now from 2018 to the next 4 years, it's been a situation where now that the prices are at a point where lenders will lend, and if you're not in our market, you know, we could do transactions 45 to 65, which is kind of unheard of in general. But prior to that, lenders were not lending unless it was a $50,000 minimum. So you had to get the price points to a point where it was at least affordable for people to do it and affordable for lenders to even make the loans, because it actually cost them more money to do those transactions because of the loan amount was so low.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm seeing a lot of corporate, like you said, investors, larger investors come in the area and buy a lot of our properties right now. And so, with that being said, why do you think they're investing more heavily in real estate versus other types of investments like stocks, bonds?
Well, I think there was a trend set back during the crash. When the market crashed, the hedge funds were essentially trying to get into the marketplace. Once they was able to get in to buy from the GSEs, which is Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and HUD, they start buying bulk houses and bulk rate levels, you know, packages of $5 billion, $7 billion at a time. And they were buying what they call NPLs, non-performing loans, loans that were on the books and people were behind or staying in the house, or the bank just hadn't foreclosed on them, so they just sold a note at a discount. So somebody's in a $150,000 house, the bank sells it for $80,000, and then you deal with the headache of dealing with the people, making them pay or putting them out. And so a lot of that happened, and some banks shared it off some of their product. But you had a couple of hedge funds that rehabbed the properties, kept people in them, made a ton of money. I think the numbers I read was like $7 billion when they sold the portfolio about 2 years ago. And they're out of the game. Well, they created a model in the marketplace. They created something that would be a benchmark for other hedge funds, whether they were half the size or 10% of the size. They could look at real estate's a safe bet, and they're looking at the rental returns as opposed to buying and selling. They're evaluating a real estate stock portfolio like you would evaluate buying stock in Microsoft and looking at how it would perform, and or buying in Amazon, and your stock is gonna grow in this direction over 5 years. Well, what's happening in real estate, they getting 2 for 1. They get the income stream, which is equivalent to dividends in the stock market, and then they get the appreciation. If they ever want to sell off the portfolio to somebody, they can participate in the upside. So that's why it's so attractive to them. And there's a lot of money that they have to place somewhere. And with the stock market being overinflated and very heated, for diversification reasons, they love the idea of real estate, especially a city like Cleveland where properties are very inexpensive.
And would you say that's what kind of makes Cleveland unique in terms of that, investing in the area, the prices versus other areas? What do you think attracts, besides that, what do you think are some of the other reasons why investors
I think it's, not to cut you off, I think it's extremely attractive because you can't do that in Cincinnati or Columbus.
Right.
Those price points are extremely high, maybe 3-4 times the amount of our price points overall. And we have some good pockets of Cleveland, particularly on the west side, where they're very strong and established. But the east side is sort of the hidden gold. And so it's that, and then CNBC ranked Cleveland the #1 city for rental returns in 2018, which means that at that point everybody turned their focus toward investing in Cleveland for the highest rental returns. In addition to that, Forbes recognized us in the fall of 2020 as one of the 4th cities to watch for real estate. And that wasn't because of the highest crime or the poorest city in the nation, where we sort of got a black eye in the game for some of those comments, but it was merely on the basis of it's an opportunity, a good place to live, affordability, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, where do you see the market going? Like, do you foresee us going backwards into the 2008? Because a lot of that has been talked about right now as far as, there's going to be a coming crash because of the pandemic. A lot of people lost their jobs and what have you. A lot of people retired, or they just changed careers or went into business for themselves. A lot of different things happen.
Yes.
So with that being said, what do you think is going to be the
I kind of
pandemic?
sort of have mixed thoughts about that, and I debated a couple past customers, other investors about the same conversation. I certainly don't see it happening like 2008. 2008, mortgage prices were really inflated, and no income, no assets. It was all based on faulty loan products that couldn't sustain themselves, and people who bought the properties had no ability to recover if they fell a month or two behind. Today is different. Investors, on the other hand, are in a different position. Most of them are all in cash, and some of them are refinanced and pull money out. So it's stable in that sense. So you're not going to see a foreclosure falling in that volume like we had before. But what you are going to see at some point is things to kind of taper off. When that would happen, my guess is maybe each market is different. And since it just hit Cleveland in the last 24 to 36 months, where it's been in some other cities like California for the past 5 years, or Houston, or different markets, it's just been exploding. Or even you take a place like Austin, that's Austin, Texas, that's been exploding. But now they got another injection because Tesla just moved their headquarters there. So a lot of tech people moving from San Francisco are going there to live, and for $400,000 they couldn't buy anything in San Francisco. They could buy a nice house where they were renting in California. So that's continuing to drive the market. So I think each market will be unique and distinctively different. I think in our market, it could top off in a couple years. A combination of interest rates, values getting back to where they should be or where they was prior to subprime. We're still not back there yet. We're probably between 60 and 80% of what price points should have been. And then there's no adjustment for the appreciation over the past 20 years, essentially. So I think in about 24 to 36 months, you could see some ease up. I don't see a collapse. I do see some potential possibilities of foreclosures coming in the market. But there are prevention groups and organizations that are even stepping in now to help people, to Save the Dream program and other programs helping people stay in their homes. So it's really working out well.
Well, I think the narrative has come to that because people are saying, oh, the loan forbearances that were given out. Can you tell the audience, first of all, what a forbearance is, and then how you see that fulfilling itself out in the next year or two?
Sure. A loan forbearance allows a loan to halt, stop, stand still in its foreclosure process to allow the consumer to get some financial support to be able to stay in the property and work out and restructure the loan. So what happened in a lot of instances during the pandemic, people didn't pay for 6 months or a year. They took, my note is $1,000 as an example. I didn't pay for 12 months. They took the $12,000 and put it on the back of the loan, re-amortized that loan and structured it. So if I owed $100 and now it's $112, then they gave me a new loan at the current interest rate and started my payments all over. So essentially they gave me a reset. They hit the reset button and allowed me to reset. And that allowed people to get through the fact that people were laid off. Because everybody didn't get all this unemployment. Everybody didn't get all this money that people think people received. Some people got it and they took advantage of it, but it wasn't 100% across the board. So some people really needed help because jobs phased out. They couldn't do virtual work schedules for their employees and they let people go. And so they were jobless, so they needed that. So the economy needed that, so we wouldn't. And I give the Biden administration credit for that because they were on top of that to make sure that we wouldn't go through what we went through during the 2008 to 2012 crisis.
I have another question for you in terms of for traditional buyers. So as we just talked about, a lot of the corporate investors are coming in and they're purchasing a lot of the stock that is available, which is very limited right now. So with that being said, how do you feel that buyers can get into the game, get into this buying process? Like, what are some, or I should ask you, what are some of the other things that you feel are challenges for buyers right now, besides the corporate investors that are, being able to compete with them with cash and what have you? What are some other, like interest rates? I know interest rates are going up right now. What do you see as other challenges for
Well,
buyers right now?
the first challenge for them is it's a seller's market right now, so
Yes.
it's not in the buyer's favor.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna, in most cases, get a property for what it's on the market for if it's not overpriced, or you're gonna pay more. So it's not like something, again, using $100,000 as the benchmark that you're gonna get it for 95, because sellers can wait and get their number or beyond. So that's really hurting the buyers, and I think buyers have to be patient and position themselves with their credit, with their savings, and their income, and not to get discouraged while they wait. But you got a lot of pre-approved buyers that are sitting on the sideline and they just can't buy a house, and they have to be patient, or they should be patient, until they can come through and end up getting something, and then be flexible in their search. Maybe you wanted a rec room, or maybe you needed 2.5 baths or 3.5 baths. Can you do without a half bath or full bath? Can you add the bathroom yourself? Is that something you can deal with? Can you go from a 2-car to 1-car? Can that work? Can it be expanded at some point in the future? So they have to be flexible, because you may not be able to get everything you want in a house. And if you want to wait until you can get everything you want in a house, you're entitled to do that, but just understand it may not happen for 3 to 6 months. And if you're cool with that, so be it.
Okay. Now, I don't know how you would feel about this question.
Okay.
But, so, I think one of the other challenges is lack of resources, personal resources. And what I mean by that is, you want to buy a house. They want to buy a house, but they need the seller to assist them with closing costs.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, in a seller's market, would you say they're really qualified to buy if they need the seller to help them with closing costs? And do you see that as a challenge for buyers in this market that need that? Because they're competing with people who don't need that. So how do you feel about buyers who do need, like not want, but they need the seller to assist them with closing costs?
Yeah, I think that if a lending institution approves Julius Cartwright for a home, then I really should be buying a home, because it's validated by a bank or institution that says that I'm approved for X amount of dollars. However, I may only have 3%, 5% of my own money, and I do need help with those closing costs. Again, that buyer has to be flexible in that maybe what they do is increase the price to cover the closing costs. Because if they need 3% or up to 6% closing costs, it's probably only changing their payments by $21 to $50 a month. And if they can handle that increase without their debt ratio being off, then they should go for it and get the property, because in the scheme of things, it'll take 10 or 11 years to pay that money back. So you're better off building it. Because I've always told my buyers, even if you have the money, do the closing costs and put them in the transaction financing and keep your money for reserves or emergency basis or something like that. So I think it's still a good way for them to go. But they're going to lose out on some properties, because people are buying cash, people are putting more money down, and people don't need closing costs, and they're going to take the strongest buyer. And if you need closing costs, they figure you need help. And if it doesn't exceed the price, all things being equal, they're going to go with the highest bidder.
Right.
So you got to be prepared to either pay more, provided the property will qualify, and appraise for a higher sales price than you would otherwise.
Right. Speaking of appraisals, as you said, right now, mostly everything is inflated.
Right.
So with it being such a demand for homes, and it being, being a shortage, which raises demand, which raises price, the old, supply and demand formula, economic formula. So with that being said, what was I gonna say?
Well, I think I know where you're going with that. I would say if it's a situation where you have a person buying a house, if they plan to be in a house for at least 10 to 12 years, then it makes sense. But if you know you're going to be moving in a short period of time, I wouldn't advise them to go over list price to the degrees that we've seen some properties 5, 10, 20, as high as 40,000 or 50,000 over list price. And in some instances it didn't appraise. I know one case where it appraised 32,000 over list price, and the people end up going through with the deal. But the agent explained to them, I'm totally against this representing you because you're overpaying, and basically you're going to be in this property stuck for an extended period of time. And if you know that going in, that's the key. You got to know it going in that, you know, I don't plan to move or sell my house in 10 or 15 years.
Right.
Then you give yourself a chance for everything to recoup.
And that's exactly where I was headed with that. You know,
Okay.
how are properties appraising? You know, like they are, because that's always a concern when you bid above the asking price. Will it actually appraise for that? And it seems like with the market being inflated like it is, that hasn't really been an issue too much.
No, it hasn't. And I think I give credit to the appraisers and as well as the banks, because again, when that appraiser turns it into that underwriter, he or she has to sign their name authorizing that, you know, this valuation and this property, and that underwriter is ultimately on the hook for that loan if that loan goes in default, you know, off of something, you know, outside of, you know, natural causes of death or unemployment or something like that.
Right.
But they've done a good job of kind of watching the valuation. But it's easy to do if you got two properties that sell, you know, $5,000 over list price, they become a comp. Then the next 2 to 5 properties go another 5,000, they become a comp. So you go from 100 to 105 to 110, and if you got enough properties transferring, before you know it, you're up to 115, 120, because your properties have been closing and those valuations have constantly went up to the point that now it becomes market. So that property 2 years ago that sold for 100, now selling for 120, is really not a stretch because it's supported by the data out here that supports the valuation.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So this is kind of like a loaded question. So I want to talk about real estate cycles.
Okay.
Now that'll kind of take us back to when you started.
Okay.
Because you've been in this for how long now?
34 years.
34 years. So you've seen a lot of cycles.
Yes.
So what year did you get licensed?
In 1988.
Okay. So 1988.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us about the cycles since you started, you know, because housing is cyclical. So talk about real estate cycles.
Yeah, and before I do that, I need to tell a quick story. So I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was saying, a millennial of all people, he was saying that, you know, interest rates about to go up, and, you know, interest rates are getting high now, and I don't know if it makes sense to buy. And I'm like, man, it's 5.5. Do you know what interest rates was when I started selling real estate? 11. 11% was the rate, and anything under 10 was good, very good. Anything, you know, 11% we was selling, and then we got down to the 8s and 7s, which was great. And I said, if you got a 7%, that's great. But basically, people have been spoiled because we've been at 2.5 to 4 for the past 5 to 6 years, and so the rates have been kind of low, and now they're at 5.5. This young man thinks, I said, man, that's a fantastic rate. So you gotta jump on that and buy that condo that you trying to buy for investment property because it makes sense.
Right.
And so, you know, people don't understand that. But the cycles are gonna hit cyclical with interest rates. You know, there's gonna be some pullback, as I said, foreclosures. It won't be as many as we had before, but there will be some, and they're saying the pipeline is coming around the country back into the foreclosure process. But it's going to be driven locally, because what happens in Cleveland won't be the same thing happen in Denver, or what happens in Denver won't happen in Columbus won't happen in Chicago. So every market is going to be different. The cycles are, we're seeing a lot of gentrification in our urban corridors, particularly starting on certain areas on the east side of Cleveland with Fairfax, Huff, and Glenville Circle North, 44106, which is near Case and University Circle, where we're selling new construction. So we're seeing those prices jump because got a lot of people moving into the area, taking advantage of being in close proximity to University Hospital, VA, Cleveland Clinic, and all the other amenities around in the area. So it makes sense to them. And that cycle where that area, when I would have got back in my day in 88, 89, crack had been introduced to the community. So you had drug dealers, dope fiends, and people, crack houses going on in 88, 89, and 90. Now, if you could hit the fast forward and go in there now, you see $300,000, $400,000 homes going up in an area that historically was a depressed area because of drugs, crime, etc. So you got a lot of that taking place, and that's one of the cycles that each community goes through. It goes through a phase where it's new, where these houses might have been built in 1900 to 1920s. You had that, then you go into rehab, then you go into this decay, and then you go into this renewal. So we're going into from decay to regentrification stage. So it cycles every 40 years. So every 10 years, something changes with the neighborhood, and it changes in the real estate cycle in the industry as well.
What do you think is the driving force for the next housing cycle? Would you say it was COVID that is going to take us into that next?
Well, I think that
phase
next cycle is going to be probably driven by your next speaker that you're going to be interviewing. That's Generation Z, Jordan Johnson. That group I'm excited about because they're going to be the #1 home buyers in 2025. And so that's 3 years, 9 months from now. They'll be the #1 buyers, eclipsing the millennials, and they'll have their run for 3 to 5 years or whatever the number happens to be. But that's the next big cycle. So if we have a reset that hits in 24 to 36 months, that reset will be short-lived because we have a whole new group of buyers. And for your audience, the Generation Z is 7 to 23. So that's the key age group. And so that group in 3 years, the guy that's 18 or the person that's 23 will be 26 and 21. That group is the next big group coming through the door.
Well, speaking of millennials, we know that student loans have a large effect on, people's ability to purchase homes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's huge. And I'm prayerful that the Biden administration is working on something like that, to work with a lot of the student debt. But, I had a friend of mine talk about selling a couple of property that both was handling close to $250,000 worth of student loan debt after graduating from college, and they're making great income, but because of the student loan debt, they don't qualify. So they've been working on ways to, even though it's in deferment, they still have to count the payments, and therefore you still don't qualify because of the debt situation. But in essence, they're paying the rent where they live at now, and they're able to afford the rent. So it's something that I'm hoping that, I know there's a lot of legislation going on around it. In Cleveland now, they have a new program where they got together some multimillionaires, and they put together, I don't know, it's $45 million or something like that, that if you live in Cleveland, you graduate with a certain GPA, you can go to college for free. So that's why a lot of people are saying, okay, well, all of a sudden I don't need to go into the suburb for the best school system necessarily, when I can actually take advantage of being able to just live in Cleveland and enjoy the benefits of getting this money and sending my kids to school for free.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as you stated, there's a lot of reinvestment happening in Cleveland, a lot of new construction and things of that nature. Why do you think, or can you talk about why people left the city and now, they're coming back? Obviously, there's amenities in Cleveland that are more attractive now. But can you talk about that?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, most people left Cleveland to get into the suburb, to get their kids a better education, to be able to take advantage of a better so-called better areas to live in. So, and school system. So those are two big reasons why people move. Some of what's going on is some people are coming back to the city because they see the value. They want to be close to downtown, close to where they work. They can ride their bikes. They can, get on a skateboard. They can walk, whatever, or even they just drive. It's 5 minutes away to work. So I can leave at 8:45 and still be there on time versus leaving at 8 o'clock, having that long commute in. Then the other thing that's taking place is transplants that are coming into the greater Cleveland area who see this as normal because they know about the urban areas and the areas that they have to move into. So it's just an automatic thing for them. They just see it like, this is what we need to do and this is where everything is going. And they're not really concerned about the area because that's the new thing to do.
Absolutely. So, what areas or trends do you see most influencing the future of this real estate market in this area?
Oh man, that's
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, I still think a lot of what's happening has been influences our downtown growth with everything we have downtown. We got our 3 major sports teams. The Cavs, Browns, and now the Guardians for the baseball team. That's all downtown, and then our population is growing with Cleveland State being more of a transit school, now being a school where they're building more dorms and people are coming to live downtown that are attending Cleveland State. And then things like you see going on in University Circle and the Fairfax area with tremendous, $200 million to $500 million worth of development going on. That's driving a lot of what's taking place and a lot of what's going to move people back into these areas. Because those are forgotten communities that are just no activity, that have just expanded to new heights.
Awesome. That's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about you now. Just a little bit about you to wrap things up. So if you could just tell us, what sparked your interest in real estate and, what made you become a broker, and tell us about some of the other things that you're involved in right now.
Okay. Well, I'll try to give you a short version of that. Okay. But I was actually working with one of my mentors, Donald Jones, who was a painter, and I was painting houses. I was 19 years old. And I was going to community college for real estate, and I just said, man, people are going to always need real estate. Always going to need somewhere to live. I should probably get my real estate license. And it so happens his brother was in real estate. William Jones was with a company called A.J. Lewis and Associates, which is Lionel and Lucius. And I went to school and got my real estate license and got into it to give it a shot. And it started to work out well, and things went well. And I expanded my company, created a team back in 1994, and we was one of the first. In fact, we probably was maybe only 2 or 3 real estate teams at the time in '94 when we began this, and we started the Dreamteam, and then it grew into a team, and I eventually got my broker's license when I was 28, and I got licensed at 22, and I started my career at 23 because I got licensed right in the fall. And I got my license, but I had no intentions of starting my own brokerage because I had a team inside the brokerage and we had a great working relationship, but my broker decided that he wanted to exit the business, so I bought him out in 2000 and I started the Dream Team. Okay. And so now we've kind of moved, we're in year 22 and still moving through the landscape.
And that's how many years now?
Total 34, yeah.
34,
yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
And some of the other things I'm involved in, obviously, is the equity movement.
Yes.
We have a financial wellness program to help individuals with 15 different resources. And they can go to the website and look at that information, equitymovement247.com. And of course, what we're dealing with now, House Notes magazine. I think media and holding a conversation is important to share with people like you're doing and others who may be tuning in. So we got House Notes TV, House Note magazine, and now House Note Podcast, thanks to you. So congratulations, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that's a few things I'm working on. I'm eventually trying to move into the development space and become more of a developer as well.
Okay. What are some things you do outside of real estate?
I don't have not much time left.
Yeah, tell us some things that we don't know about you.
Oh my goodness. I'm a workaholic. You probably already know that.
Yes.
But things that I do outside of real estate, you know, I like to. I'm a movie buff. I mean, that all tapered off a little bit with COVID, but
Yes.
normally go see 4 to 6 movies a month, sometimes more, depending on what comes out. So I love going to the movies. I love hanging out, entertaining, barbecuing, hanging out with family and friends, and also play a little tennis. Thanks to another one of my mentors, Mr. Jalen Burke. He got me started on the tennis court, but now I'm as rusty as a tin man because I haven't picked up a racket in a while, but I think I still got some skills.
Okay.
So I'm gonna get out there with Jay this summer and see if we can, battle it out a little bit.
Okay. All right. What do you do to stay motivated in this business? Because this is a very tough business.
It
so
is.
What do you do to stay motivated?
It is. I started off when I got started with a lot of personal development, listening to Anthony Robbins, Miles Monroe, the current guy today, E.T., Eric Thomas. So I listened to a lot of different motivational pieces, spiritual pieces, to just kind of stay encouraged. And I've been doing this so long, the one thing I do know that if you're doing something and things are not going well, in 30 days, if you just keep grinding, you can turn any situation around. You can turn your income around in real estate. You can get your buyers all on paper in 30 days. So you have to, sort of way I was saying that the buyers have to be patient. As a practitioner, you got to be patient and pace yourself and not sort of panic or give up because the success is not sort of filtering your way.
Right.
And so that has really worked out to be pretty good.
Right. I'm going to end it with this. Tell us one of your most favorite quotes.
I knew you was going there.
Words of wisdom.
One of my favorite quotes, and this quote is definitely in the book that we're putting together with Praise and Power. And this is a Julius Cartwright quote too.
Okay.
Most dreamers are constantly dreaming while most entrepreneurs are consistently performing. Yeah, so most dreamers are constantly dreaming while most entrepreneurs are consistently performing. And the thing, that quote, I woke up with that quote even before I started writing quotes. And I started writing it down on index cards because it's okay to dream, but if you dream and don't perform, then it's really just a dream.
Right.
So you got to put the performance, and that's the difference to me in a dreamer, which some entrepreneurs are dreamer, but consistently you got to be doing what you need to do in business and performing and not just dreaming about it because you got to put some implementation in it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Do you have any other final words you'd like to share with us? Or
No,
advice
other
from
than
the
I'm
listener?
excited about this podcast. I
Yes.
think this kind of completes the full circle of what we're doing with with the TV and the podcast and the magazine. I think we got all mediums covered. I think you're going to do a great job.
Thank you.
And congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm excited to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming and checking us out tonight. And we'll be back soon. Until next time. Take
Thank you.
care.